The ink on the divorce papers was still drying when my sister-in-law texted me a photo of herself in my wedding dress, standing in what used to be my bedroom. The message read, "Thanks for leaving it behind. Fits me better anyway." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, sitting in a motel room with nothing but a duffel bag and my 5-year-old daughter sleeping beside me. I'm Rachel Morrison, and 3 weeks ago, I thought I had everything figured out. A loving husband, a beautiful home in Austin, Texas, and a daughter who was my entire world. Then I found out my husband had been having an affair with his coworker for 2 years. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just said he wanted a divorce and that I needed to leave the house immediately. The house. The house I'd poured my savings into for the down payment. The house where I'd painted every room myself while 7 months pregnant because we couldn't afford contractors. The house that was supposed to be in both our names, but somehow when the papers were signed, only his name appeared on the title. He'd told me it was a tax thing, that we'd fix it later. I was too trusting, too in love, too stupid. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had always been cold to me. She'd made it clear from day one that her precious son had married beneath him. I was just a public school teacher with student loans, not the doctor or lawyer she'd envisioned for him, but I never imagined she'd go this far. When I refused to leave without a legal settlement, Patricia called me at school. I remember standing in the hallway during my lunch break, trying to keep my voice down as she hissed through the phone. "You'll get nothing, Rachel." My son filed first. "You abandoned the marital home. And that little girl of yours? We have lawyers who will prove you're an unfit mother. You work full-time, you have no family support here, and you can barely afford your own student loans. How are you going to fight us?" I wanted to scream that I hadn't abandoned anything, that her son had changed the locks while I was at work and told me through a text message not to come back, but my voice wouldn't work. All I could do was cry in that empty hallway, my teaching materials scattered on the floor around me. That was 3 weeks ago. Now I was living in a Motel 6 off Interstate 35, using the last of my credit to keep a roof over our heads. My daughter, Emma, kept asking when we could go home. I didn't have an answer. I'd contacted 3 lawyers. None would take my case without a retainer I couldn't afford. Legal aid had a 6-month wait list. My family was back in Oregon, barely making ends meet themselves. I was drowning, and there was no one to throw me a rope. What do you do when the system fails you? When the person you loved weaponizes everything you built together? When his family has unlimited resources, and you're teaching elementary school on a salary that barely covers rent? I wanted to give up. Some nights, after Emma fell asleep, I'd sit in the parking lot and just sob until I couldn't breathe. But every morning, I'd wake up and look at my daughter's face, and I'd remember why I had to keep fighting. The worst part wasn't the motel or the financial stress. It was the isolation. My ex-husband had been careful. He'd poisoned every mutual friendship we had, telling people I'd cheated, that I was mentally unstable, that I'd tried to turn Emma against him. Even my colleagues at school started looking at me differently after his mother made some calls to the district. I was being pushed out of every corner of my life. Then came the custody hearing. I showed up with a court-appointed lawyer who'd met me 15 minutes before we entered the courtroom. My ex had a team of 3 attorneys, all in designer suits. Patricia sat in the front row, looking at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. The hearing was a nightmare. They painted me as an absent mother who prioritized work over her child. They claimed I was emotionally manipulative. They brought up my student loans as evidence of financial irresponsibility. My ex lied under oath, saying I'd left voluntarily, that he'd begged me to stay for Emma's sake. I barely held it together on the stand. When the judge asked why I'd left the marital home, I tried to explain about the locks, about being forced out, but my court-appointed lawyer kept interrupting me to keep it brief. I watched the judge's face and saw the exact moment he stopped believing me. Temporary custody went to my ex. I got supervised visitation twice a week. As I walked out of that courtroom, Patricia brushed past me and whispered, "You should have just left quietly. Now you'll lose everything, including her." I sat in my car for an hour, unable to drive, unable to think. How had this happened? How had I gone from a happy marriage to losing my home, my reputation, and my daughter in the span of a month? That night, I drove to a park and sat on a bench until the sun came up. I was ready to do what Patricia wanted, just disappear, sign whatever papers they put in front of me, and start over somewhere far away. Maybe Emma would be better off without me dragging her down. I was checking my phone for bus routes to Oregon when I saw an email notification. The sender was someone named Catherine Zhang, and the subject line read, "Regarding your case against Morrison." My first thought was that it was another legal threat. But something made me open it. The email was brief. Catherine Zhang was a family law attorney who'd recently moved to Austin from New York. She'd heard about my case through courthouse networks and wanted to meet. No retainer required. Just a conversation. I almost deleted it. It felt like a scam, or worse, another humiliation waiting to happen. But I had nothing left to lose, so I agreed to meet her the next morning at a coffee shop near the university. Catherine was nothing like I'd expected. She was young, maybe early 30s, with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. She ordered us both coffee and got straight to the point. "I know who Patricia Morrison is," she said. "And I know what she's doing to you." I must have looked confused because she pulled out her laptop and showed me a file. It was thick with documents, emails, financial records. "Patricia Morrison has done this before," Catherine said. 3 times, actually. All daughters-in-law who divorced her sons. All of them ended up with nothing. She has a pattern of using her connections in the legal community to bury women who threaten her family's image. "How do you know this?" I asked, my coffee going cold in my hands. "Because the third woman? That was my sister." The world seemed to stop. Catherine closed her laptop and looked at me with eyes that held the same pain I felt every day. "My sister married Patricia's oldest son 8 years ago. When the marriage fell apart, Patricia used the same playbook, froze her out financially, turned everyone against her, fought for custody of the kids. My sister tried to fight back through traditional legal channels, but Patricia had too many connections. Judges who owed her favors. Lawyers who wouldn't take cases against the Morrison family. What happened to your sister?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "She lost custody. Lost everything. She spiraled into depression and died 3 years ago from an overdose." Catherine's voice was steady, but I could see the tension in her jaw. "I became a lawyer because of what happened to her. I've spent the last 2 years building cases against the Morrison family, collecting evidence, talking to other women they've destroyed. You're not the first, Rachel, but if you're willing to fight, you could be the last." I should have been skeptical. This was too convenient, too perfect. But when I looked into Catherine's eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope mixed with rage. The same combination I felt every time I thought about what they'd taken from me. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Everything. Every text message, every email, every witness who saw what really happened. And I need you to trust me when I tell you to stay quiet, even when they push you. Can you do that?" I thought about Emma. About the way she'd cried during our last supervised visit, asking why she couldn't come home with me. About Patricia's smug face in the courtroom. About my wedding dress in someone else's photos. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." What I didn't know then was that Catherine had been planning this for months. She'd been waiting for the right case, the right plaintiff who would be willing to see it through. And she had evidence I couldn't have imagined. Over the next week, I met with Catherine almost daily. She had me write down everything in chronological order. Every conversation with my ex, every interaction with Patricia, every financial transaction from our marriage. She had forensic accountants review our bank statements. She had investigators interview my neighbors, my colleagues, anyone who'd witnessed what happened. And then she showed me what she'd found. My ex-husband had started moving money out of our joint accounts 6 months before he asked for the divorce. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. He'd opened accounts in his name only and transferred our savings bit by bit. By the time he filed for divorce, there was almost nothing left in our joint accounts. But that wasn't all. Catherine's investigators had found text messages between my ex and his mother, planning the divorce strategy. Patricia had been coaching him on how to build a case for full custody, how to make me look unstable, even how to manipulate mutual friends. "This is illegal," I said, staring at printouts of the messages. "This is conspiracy, right?" "It's worse than that," Catherine said. She pulled up another file. "Your ex claimed you abandoned the marital home voluntarily, but I have ring camera footage from your neighbor's house showing him changing the locks at 3 in the afternoon on the day you were at work. I have the locksmith's invoice, and I have text messages where he tells his mother, and I quote, 'She'll have to leave eventually if she can't get in.'" I felt sick. The man I'd loved, the man I'd built a life with, had orchestrated my destruction with his mother like it was a business transaction. "We're filing an emergency motion," Catherine said. "We're going to bring all of this to light. But Rachel, I need you to prepare yourself. When we do this, it's going to get ugly. They're going to retaliate. Can you handle that?" I thought about my daughter, about teaching her to stand up for herself, to fight when things are unfair, to never let anyone make her feel small. "I can handle it," I said. The emergency hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In that time, Patricia's lawyers came after me with everything they had. They filed motions claiming I was harassing my ex. They tried to have my teaching license investigated. They even sent a social worker to the motel where Emma and I were staying, claiming they'd received reports of neglect. Each attack felt like a knife, but Catherine had prepared me. We documented everything. Every false claim, every legal threat, every attempt to intimidate me. It all went into our case file. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if the judge didn't believe us? What if Patricia's connections were too strong? What if I lost Emma forever? But when I walked into that courtroom the next morning, something had changed. I wasn't the same broken woman who'd sat in a parking lot considering running away. I was angry, and I was ready to fight. Catherine presented our case methodically. She showed the judge the financial records proving my ex had systematically stolen from our joint accounts. She showed the Ring camera footage of him changing the locks. She presented the text messages between him and his mother planning how to destroy my credibility. I watched Patricia's face as each piece of evidence was revealed. The smug confidence melted into shock, then panic. But Catherine wasn't done. She called witnesses I didn't know she had. The locksmith who'd changed our locks testified that my ex had specifically asked him to do it while I was at work, saying it was a surprise for his wife. My neighbor testified about seeing my ex load my belongings into garbage bags and leave them on the curb. Even one of my ex's co-workers testified that he'd bragged about getting rid of the dead weight weeks before filing for divorce. When Catherine called me to the stand, I was ready. I told the truth calmly and clearly. About the lies, the manipulation, the systematic destruction of my life. About standing in a school hallway while Patricia threatened me. About my daughter crying during supervised visits. Then Catherine asked the question she'd prepared me for. "Mrs. Morrison, why didn't you fight back sooner?" I looked at the judge, then at Patricia, then at my ex. Because I believed that the truth would be enough. I believed that the system would protect me and my daughter. I was wrong. But I'm not anymore. The judge was silent for a long moment after Catherine rested our case. Patricia's lawyers tried to object, to claim the evidence was obtained illegally, to do anything to stop what was coming. But it was too late. The judge's ruling was swift. He found that my ex had committed fraud and perjury. He reversed the temporary custody order immediately. He ordered a full investigation into Patricia's involvement and referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. But the most satisfying moment came when the judge looked directly at Patricia and my ex and said, "This court does not look kindly on those who abuse the legal system to destroy families. You should both be ashamed." As I left the courtroom with Catherine, I heard Patricia shouting something about appeals, about connections, about how this wasn't over. But for the first time in months, I didn't care. I had my daughter back. I had the truth on my side. And I had someone fighting for me. The next few months were complicated. My ex-husband faced criminal charges for fraud and perjury. Patricia's involvement led to investigations into her other cases, and Catherine reached out to the women she'd destroyed before me. 3 of them came forward with similar stories. The Morrison family's reputation in Austin's legal community crumbled. I got a financial settlement that included everything my ex had stolen plus damages. The house was sold, and I got my share. It was enough for me to put a down payment on a smaller place, just for Emma and me, with the title in my name only. My ex lost custody entirely after lying under oath. He got supervised visitation, the same thing he'd forced on me. Karma, I guess. But the biggest change was in me. I wasn't the same person who'd cried in that motel parking lot. I'd learned that sometimes the system fails you, but that doesn't mean you stop fighting. It means you fight smarter, harder, and you find people who believe in you. Catherine and I stayed in touch. She eventually launched a nonprofit helping women in similar situations, offering free legal services to those fighting powerful families. I volunteered when I could, using my story to help others realize they weren't alone. Emma adjusted better than I'd hoped. She was young enough that the trauma hadn't scarred her permanently, and therapy helped. She knew her father had made mistakes, but she also knew that I'd fought to keep her safe. That mattered more than anything. 6 months after the final settlement, I was standing in our new kitchen, helping Emma with her homework, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Rachel Morrison?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Jennifer. I'm going through a divorce right now, and someone gave me your name. They said you might be able to help me understand what I'm up against. My mother-in-law, she's been making threats, and I don't know what to do." I looked at Emma, peacefully working on her math problems at our kitchen table. I thought about how close I'd come to giving up, to letting them win. "I can help," I said. "Let me give you Catherine Zhang's number. And Jennifer, whatever you're going through, you're not alone. You're stronger than you think." As I hung up the phone, Emma looked up at me with a smile. "Was that someone you're helping, Mom?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Someone who needs to know that good people still win sometimes. Like you did?" I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained, the scars that would never fully heal and the strength I'd discovered I had. "Yeah," I said, ruffling her hair. "Like I did. The truth is, I never wanted to be strong. I wanted to be happy, to be loved, to build a simple life with someone I trusted. But when that was taken from me, when I was pushed to the absolute edge, I found something I didn't know I had. I found my voice, I found my fight, and I found that sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up showing you exactly how powerful you really are. Patricia Morrison wanted to break me. Instead, she created someone who would spend the rest of her life making sure other women didn't break either. And that's a legacy I can live with.